and both candidates will have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to answer it. Instead of the candidates responding directly to each other, having rebuttals, journalists may ask a follow-up question, just to seek some clarity to an answer. Because this is being broadcast live, we ask our audience to be polite and attentive and refrain from cheering or booing or clapping until the end of the evening. Timers are Sandra Stutters, Joan Acosta, and Diana Johnson, all from the League of Women Voters. With that, I'd like to turn this to our moderators tonight. We have Andy Cohen of KOAA News 5. We have Kara Mason of The Pulp, and Andrea Chelvin from KRCC Public Radio for Southern Colorado. Take it away.
All right. We are just a few minutes away from our broadcast window opening here with about 2 minutes left, so I want to take just a minute and stretch things out just a little bit and give you guys a little bit of my background and allow the other panelists here to speak for a minute or two about ourselves. But I'm a journalist. I'm a Pueblo boy. I grew up here, delivering the Pueblo Chieftain, and got my foot in the door over at Channel 5 on Big Hill 15 years ago, and have been working there ever since, and every now and then they trust me enough to put me on television for events like this. So I can't tell you how excited I am to see this room full of people. I love that there is this much participation and involvement in our democracy tonight. So thank you to everyone for being here, and with that I'm going to introduce the lady to my left. This is Kara Mason.
Hi, my name is Kara Mason. I'm also a Pueblo native. I grew up here. I attended Pueblo West High School, and then I graduated from CSU Pueblo in 2015. And I've pretty much been with John and the Pulp since its beginning in 2012 with John. So with that, I'll let Andrea introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Andrea Chelvin. I am the managing editor for 91.5 KRCC in Southern Colorado's public radio station. I've been here for about 10 years. I am not a native of Pueblo, I'm sorry to say, but I am really excited. Oh, thank you. I apologize for that. I am really excited to be here tonight, though, and I am also thrilled to see this room full of folks who are looking to find out more about the candidates and be engaged in the process.
All right. So we tossed a coin to decide who is going to speak first during this debate this evening. And we should really say this is a bit of a candidate forum. We're going to ask questions of our two candidates. They're each going to have an opportunity to reply. And then, as Ruth had told us, they've got a 2-minute window to kind of keep the responses in. And we were able to, like we said, field a lot of questions on social media. Our thanks to John and the good folks at The Pulp for putting a lot of that together. We tried to squeeze as many of them into as we could. With we're going to do this in about an hour here, so we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as we could because we really wanted you to have a voice in what happens here. So the winner of the coin toss for this evening was actually Mr. Nick Gradisar. So he is going to be the candidate of the two who will be answering first with these opening statements. And Mr. Gradisar, before we begin, I want to stretch things out just for another 20 seconds here because we are very, very close to the beginning of this showtime. We are now at 15 seconds. Okay, thank you so much, Adam, for the time cue on that. But let me do this. I want to begin by saying, for many Puebloans, this is really their first introduction to you after a very crowded general election. So, Nick, if you would, why don't you tell us all why it is that you want to be another 15? Okay, hold on. Nope, not less than 15. Here we go.
Here we go.
And let's begin. Everyone, welcome so much tonight to Debate Night in Pueblo. And as I said, Mr. Gradisar, for those folks who are just joining us on the video stream, won the coin toss. You're going to be answering the first question first. So for many Puebloans, this is their first introduction to you in a very crowded general election. Why don't you tell us why you want to be mayor?
Thanks, Andy, and thanks all of you for being here, and thanks to our sponsors for having this event this evening. In a nutshell, I want to be mayor because I love my hometown. I want to see it thrive and prosper, and I believe that I have the skills to help it do so. I was a strong proponent of changing our system of government to the strong mayor system, and once the voters decided to do that, I decided that I would be committed to seeing that change succeed. When I was growing up in Pueblo, Pueblo was the second largest city in the state of Colorado. Now we're 8th or 9th. In that 60 years, the population of Colorado has tripled, and ours has gone up about 10%. And that failure to thrive in Pueblo has really been expensive for us as a community. I was born, like many of you, born, raised, and educated in Pueblo. My dad was a steel worker. My mom was a registered nurse and an administrator. I graduated from Southern Colorado State College, and during the summers when I was going to school at SCSC, I worked at the mill, on the labor gang, at the open hearth making steel. During the school year, I worked at McDonald's and worked in the student cafeteria and worked at the warehouse at Sears. Went to law school at Drake University, and after graduating from law school, decided to come back to Colorado and went to Denver, where I studied for and passed the bar examination. After I passed the bar, I went to work for a judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals for a year. When that was done, I decided I wanted to come back to Pueblo and practice law. So for the last 40 years, I've been in the private practice of law in Pueblo. And during that period of time, I've litigated cases in state and federal court. I have negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts and been on both sides of the collective bargaining table in my law practice. I've also been involved in the community. I've been a board member of the Greater Pueblo Chamber of Commerce and served as the president of that board of directors. I'm a charter member of Action 22, was on the board of directors there, and served as the president of that board. For the last 14 years, I've been a member of the independently elected Board of Waterworks for the City of Pueblo, and I've served on as the president of that board for 6 years. So I tell you about my background because I believe that it makes me uniquely qualified to be the mayor of the City of Pueblo, and I look forward to our discussion this evening and your questions. Thank you.
Mr. Gradisar, thank you so much. And Mr. Nawrocki, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Andy. First of all, I'd like to thank the sponsors, and had a chance to talk to a lot of people in the audience, and thank you for all being here. I came to Pueblo 50 years ago to go to school. I actually fell in love with Pueblo and decided that at that time it was hard to even know what I was going to do when I grow up. But I did fall in love with Pueblo, and I knew that I never wanted to leave it except when I went away to graduate school and came back here in the mid-70s. I chose raised my family here. My daughter went to Centennial High School. She was a star athlete. Didn't get it from me, but was amazing and represented us well in this community. Her name was Louisa Nawrocki. Also, I had the opportunity to spend 40 years providing services to some of the most vulnerable people in our community. The executive director of 3 different organizations. The last 30 years I've been the executive director of the Senior Resource Development Agency, better known as SRDA. And I've had the opportunity to not only change the name of our agency from the Senior Center to the Active Adult Center. Once I turned a certain age, I thought it was important to reflect what us baby boomers liked, and that is that we don't age very well. And so it's been exciting to be able to serve this community. A number of years ago, 10 years ago, I asked our board of directors if I could run for city council, and that was unanimous, and they said go ahead and run. I ran 2 times, won twice, as elected at large, the same people that are voting for us today as mayor. Also 5 different times, city council, my peers, unanimously selected me as the leader of city council. I feel those kinds of experiences definitely give me the best qualifications for this transition. This transition is paramount in the history of our state and the history of our community. I feel that it's important for it to have somebody that has that kind of experience to be able to make sure we have a seamless transition. I think through the time as president, I made sure that we ran the meetings with civility, that we showed trust and integrity, and I plan on carrying that into becoming your mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for those opening statements. We have decided that the process this evening will be we will alternate who goes first. So this first question will be directed toward Mr. Nawrocki to answer first. We will focus on the economy, growth, and business. Since the 1990s, other Front Range cities have grown and surpassed Pueblo both in population as well as prosperity. And during the general election, both of you talked extensively about what you perceived was Pueblo's stagnancy problem. What's holding Pueblo back, and how are you going to move Pueblo forward?
Well, I think some really unfortunate circumstances came about. The deinstitutionalization of the state hospital lost a lot of jobs in our community, the cutback of the Army depot, and certainly the most significant what took place with the steel mill. No other community in the state had those kind of setbacks for the size of community we had. It has taken all these years to try to get ourselves back and having momentum. I do feel that the development of the Economic Development Agency, I think, was very paramount in terms of us moving forward, creating jobs. That continues to happen in our community. You know, another thing, I think some of our former leaders, former fathers of the city kind of kept us back a little bit because I think they were jealous of Colorado Springs. I remember when there was a chance for a regional airport and people in Pueblo, some of the leadership in Pueblo chose not to do that. You'd think today what that would have been like if there had been an airport halfway between the city of Pueblo and Colorado Springs. We have our own airport, and it's a thriving airport, especially for private planes, and DOS Aviation, one of the leaders in terms of training Air Force pilots. But I think that a lot of it had to do with the past leadership and also some unfortunate circumstances. But this community has risen to the occasion. It is coming back, and we have created thousands of jobs since the early 80s. And we have momentum going right now, and I have been part of that, and I want to see that continue.
Thank you, Mr. Gradisar.
Well, I think one of the things that's held us back a little bit is our attitude. And I think we need to have a change in attitude. We need to get much more aggressive about increasing the economic activity in this community. And sometimes we can't stay out of our own way. We get opportunities for things to happen, and you know, we just start fighting with each other about it. The city's fighting with the county, or vice versa, or Pueblo West, or those kind of things. So I think one of the things that's held us back really is we have not had a full-time elected leader in this community. And I think that's why I'm so excited about this change in our form of government, is because that full-time elected leader is going to be responsible for gelling the community and moving the community forward so that we can make some realistic economic development efforts. I think we need to be aggressive, as I said. I think we need to look at supporting entrepreneurs in Pueblo to grow their businesses here. The nice thing about that is we don't have to convince them to come here. They're already here. And so I think that can be fantastic. I think one of the things that we need to do is perhaps target industries and get more aggressive in terms of not just reacting to inquiries that PEDCO gets, but actually going out and knocking on doors. Go to California, go to Arizona, those states that are going to have problems with their water systems as the Colorado River runs dry, and target those industries that need a reliable source of water and say to them, come to Pueblo, Colorado. Pueblo has enough water to last us 80, 90, 100 years, and all our associated industries. So I think that's what we need to do as we move forward. We could look at a lot of reasons why we haven't grown, but I think part of it is that attitude. We need to change that attitude, and we're going to do that by putting a full-time elected leader in charge. Thank you.
I'd like to dig into that a little deeper. I look into the audience and I see some younger folks as well. So let's talk about the brain drain real quickly. A 2015 CSU Pueblo study found that the city's reliance on heavy manufacturing has created a brain drain by forcing those with advanced degrees to seek jobs in other parts of the state and across the country. How would you make Pueblo more competitive in Colorado for those highly skilled and educated workers? And Mr. Gradisar, I'll start with you.
Well, I think one of the ways is that, by increasing the economic activity, getting a diversity of businesses here, so it's not just manufacturing. Manufacturing is important to Pueblo. I think we'll always have manufacturing in Pueblo, but over the last 30 years, we've been pretty successful in diversifying our economy. We haven't done enough yet, and we need to figure out how can we get some of these young people here. I know there are communities around the country that are actually paying the young people who have skills and have a job where they can work at home. Give them $10,000 to move to Pueblo and bring their job with them. If they can prove they have a job, that's how I think it starts. Get some of these new industries in here. I'm hoping that the Cannabis Institute at CSUP will be able to attract some scientists and those kind of professionals as that industry takes off and grows in Pueblo. So I think those are some of the ways that we can do that. Just we need to be creative and just not make judgments about we just want manufacturing, we just want these kind of jobs. We've got to reach out to everybody.
Real quickly, a follow-up. What would your advice be to people younger than 35 on staying in Pueblo? What would you tell them?
Younger than 35? Well, my vision for this community is that we'll have an economy where nobody has to leave Pueblo to earn a living. And for somebody like me, a professional, a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, it's easy to go away, go to school, come back to Pueblo, and you can do very, very well. For people that are just getting a college education, it's not so easy, and that's what I think we need to work on. That's what I think we need to work on. So I would tell them, if you can't find something and you want to stay in Pueblo, start something. You know, let's start something up, and let's see if we can't. You come up with an idea that you think will work in this community, and I, as the mayor, would certainly do my best to get the community behind those efforts, because I think that's important, is to increase that economic activity in this community if we're going to be successful for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Nawrocki, how would you make Pueblo more competitive?
Well, you know, I think, first of all, we need to diversify our community. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that we need to promote our community. I'm committed to raising $1 million a year, and I use that term because that is the amount of money that Grand Junction uses, and they've been very successful with that dollar amount to attract new industry and to attract tourism. By diversifying our community in terms of the economy, I want us to become more of a destination than we already are. In spite of ourselves, we already are a destination. But if we start promoting our Pueblo as being a good place to live, a good place to work, a good place to raise a family, and a good place to visit, that is going to bring people, and they're going to want to come to this community. When people want to come to your community, people are going to come here, and they're going to start businesses. Pedco, I've been on that board for 7 years. In the last 2 years, they really started putting an emphasis on funding entrepreneurship type businesses. A lot of younger people. We have some very successful businesses that have gotten off the ground. That is a way for the future that we need to continue to pursue, to give incentives to young people. It still has to fit the criteria in terms of 51% of the service or the product needs to be exported out of our community. But Solar Rosa is a good example. Active Armor, which is a new company making casts that are being sent all over the country. Formula 44, which is exotic soaps that are being sent all over the country. These are some examples of entrepreneurship businesses that we need to continue to pursue and help fund for young people. But I think once we really become solidified as a destination, already people want to come here. People are moving down here. Denver is our greatest market in terms of being able to attract people, but we need to promote this community, and we need to spend money doing that. We have the means to do it in terms of the organizations, but we need to collectively come together, and I think the private sector has a responsibility to work with government in that.
And
Thank you. I hate to be a spoilsport, but
I want to ask you the same follow-up question, because you talk a lot about attracting people to our city, but what about the people who don't want to leave and feel like they have to?
Well, you know, my daughter left and didn't come back, and it wasn't because there wasn't jobs. She became a nurse, and so there's obviously a lot of opportunities. But you got to want to come back to this community. You know, that's probably the bad rap that people have talked about in terms of we're not that proud, we don't live in a cool community. But I think by rebranding our community, Gateway to the Southwest, and I don't mean taking anything away from Home of Heroes or the pepper capital of the world, but I'm talking about a regional change where we celebrate who we are, our cultural heritage, and what we stand for. We'll never be like north of El Paso County. We don't sit by the mountains, we don't sit in the pines, we don't have skiing, but what we do have is incredible landscape. We have arid climate. You can golf year around here. We can kayak. We got the lake. We have an incredible art community. We have the creative corridor. I was president of city council when the governor acknowledged that we were a new creative corridor in the state of Colorado. The gateway to the Southwest. It all starts in Pueblo, Colorado. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, 1848, the outcome of the Mexican-American War. Everything that was south of the Arkansas River now became part of the United States, which we know today as the Southwest, minus the Gadsden Purchase. We need to celebrate that. You don't have to go to Taos, you don't have to go to Santa Fe, you don't have to go to Sedona. It all starts here in Pueblo, Colorado. And once we recognize that we live in a very cool place, people are going to come back here and people will want to move here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we've heard some discussion so far about the Pueblo Economic Development Corporation, and let's dig deeper into that topic here. I mean, the people of Pueblo have been very generous with the half-cent sales tax and paying that for over 30 years now. In fact, the city of Pueblo has given away about $130 million through that tax incentive to try and create jobs here in the community, and yet we continue to see Pueblo's employment ratings kind of lagging behind some of the other Front Range cities. So does there come a time, Mr. Nawrocki, in your mind where there's something that needs to change with either the structure of that tax or with the Pueblo Economic Development Corporation itself and its goals?
Well, you know, the citizens are the ones that decide that. Every 5 years they make that decision. And I do think that it is changing right now. As I had mentioned and alluded to earlier, that now there's more emphasis starting to be on entrepreneurship, getting young people, young business people interested in starting businesses. But we still have that pretty rigid criteria. First of all, you can't give money to businesses that are going to compete with businesses on a local level. That would make sense. If I had a restaurant, you're not going to give money to another restaurant to compete. So there is something to be said for that criteria. But I do think PEDCO is making that change. We have some new leadership. We have new younger board members coming in. And I do think that the future still is that we need to make that commitment. It is very difficult to compete with the Denver metro area. I mean, come on now, we have one of the largest international airports in the United States there. The Front Range, all of the power has been in the Denver area, all the decisions in terms of infrastructure. How long did it take Pueblo, Colorado to get 1 mile of interstate updated? We are the last section of the interstate in the state of Colorado to be straightened out and to be improved. That means that we need to have a mayor who has the relationships with the people in Denver, the delegation in Washington, D.C. We got the Dillon Bridge on the north side of town. That took 15 years for us to get that, but finally we got Tiger money. We worked with our delegation in Washington, D.C. Pueblo will continue to grow north. Cities, we learned that when we were in school. Cities grow towards each other. Look at the corridor on the East Coast, the West Coast. We are going to grow towards Colorado Springs whether they like it or not, and we're going to be competing with them, and we offer a much better quality of life than Colorado Springs. So I really, truly do think that we still need to invest in economic development, but we need to fine-tune it, and we need to make it more current and adapt it to what the situation is now.
Okay. Well, Mr. Gradisar, I want to give you a chance to respond as well. I mean, is the half-cent fund and is PEDCO meeting the needs of the community still, in your opinion? And, I mean, what needs to change in order to attract more people and business to town?
Well, I think we need to get more aggressive with respect to PEDCO. I think the half-cent sales tax fund still is needed. I don't want to imagine what this community would be like if we didn't have that organization there and we didn't have those companies here at the industrial park and the South Industrial Park, Vestas and those companies, if we didn't have that money available to us to help attract those businesses here. Now we have to change, we have to be moving, but I think I can remember when Pueblo, the economy in Pueblo used to go up or down based on the mill. That's no longer the case because we've been successful in diversifying our economy. We're not there yet. We still have a lot of work to do, and we have to get aggressive about it. But I would not want to see that PEDCO go away or the half-cent sales tax fund go away, because I think, by and large, they have been successful. Now, there have been some failures, and our emphasis maybe needs to change a little bit. And as I say, I think we need to get more aggressive and be more proactive rather than reactive in terms of seeking out opportunities, but we need to take advantage of those opportunities that are presented to us.
Okay, thank you. We want to switch gears here a little bit, talk about public safety, talk about public health issues as well. And so, Mr. Gradisar, I'm going to begin with you, but let's talk about the police department. We had a question submitted by Crystal LeDuc. This is someone I had the opportunity to interview recently, but she raises the issue about response times. What can be done to get Pueblo police to respond to improve their response times and allow Pueblo police to have the resources to better serve the people of Pueblo?
Well, I think the only thing that can be done is to have more police officers, and we're on that path now. Last year, the voters passed Measure 2B, which provided for additional police officers for the police force. Those officers are about to hit the streets now. They're finishing their training. They're going to be out in the community, and that's how we're going to get the response times down, is by having more police officers on the streets. I think the chief and the police department have done a good job in terms of trying to prioritize the calls and do the most serious calls first. There's nothing more frustrating when you call 911 and you get put on hold, or you have to wait for a long time, or you talk to somebody but it takes the police officer 3 or 4 hours to get out there. I've been there and that's happened. I think the key to that is getting more police officers on the streets, and I think we're in the process of doing that right now in the city of Pueblo.
All right. Well, Mr. Nawrocki, I want to ask you the same question. How do we get response times down in the city of Pueblo for our police department?
Well, in 2016, I proposed as president of the city council a ballot initiative for half-cent sales tax. It had to do with public safety, public infrastructure, and parks and recreation. The one bad part of it is that I also wanted to be able to provide money to the district attorney's office, and I had 3 of my colleagues on council think that that was not the responsibility of the city. So we had a split vote, and ultimately, anytime you have a split vote on city council, it's very difficult to get anything passed in the community. But the public safety part of it was 24 police officers. That failed, it went down, but in 2017, we brought it back again. I supported it, even though it was not the same ballot initiative that I had proposed, because I felt those 24 officers were incredibly needed in our community. We had 207 police officers. During the Great Recession, you know, one of the ways that we balanced our budget was by cutting back on about 100 staff in the city. When 2/3 of our budget is personnel, the only way you can balance the budget coming out of the Great Recession was be able to, through attrition, not by layoffs, but through attrition, to keep the staff down. I do think that response time is improving. I think there's been documentation in the newspaper that shows that, especially the priority calls. We still don't have those additional 24 officers. That will bring us up to 231. But we'll never have 231 officers on the street. Somebody's on vacation, somebody's sick, somebody's on workman's comp. So we always have to have some kind of a cushion. That's why I'm still going to propose that we have the public safety tax that we have, that needs to be extended along with something else. But it's all about the number of police officers, and we had our hands tied for a number of years, primarily because of trying to figure out how to balance our budget. And not one department, it was across the board through attrition that we were able to balance our budget. But the number of police officers is key.
Thank you. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the opioid crisis. This is something that the city has been dealing with, as well as the police department. After receiving numerous questions on this topic, we actually decided to select Jolene Bernal's question, because it really just does get to the point. If elected, what is your plan to address the opioid crisis that plagues our city? This has been something that's not only been in my publication and on the radio and on KOAA, but in places like the New York Times have focused on the crisis here in Pueblo. So, Mr. Nawrocki, let's start with you. What would you do about the opioid crisis?
Well, first of all, this is a national issue. I think we see it every day on the news that, and they blame a lot of it on the pharmaceutical companies, and this has been going on for years. This isn't something that happened overnight. I think we need to work with our federal delegation, we need to work with our state delegation, and we need to continue to pressure them, and not only on a state level but on a national level, that they need to start being able to fund the kinds of programs that we need to address opioid addiction. And I tell you what, it can't be done with homeless people living on the street. You need to put them in a facility, just like you need substance abuse, alcohol abuse. You need to have a facility. We need to make sure that we continue to put pressure on our delegation. Our mayor, if I'm the mayor, we will work with Colorado Springs, we will work with Denver, we will work with our delegation, because this is a problem that is rampant up and down throughout our state. So I don't think it's just one thing we're going to solve. We need to have state and federal assistance, and it's about time that they recognize that this is a national problem.
Just a couple of summers ago, they were actually signing bills on the Riverwalk about doing something about opioid addiction. Governor Hickenlooper was here. You were there. I was there. So are they not doing enough? And is it going to take the mayor?
Well, I mean, I think the numbers are like, it's outrageous how many people are addicted. And the funding is just, when do they have enough funding for anything that has to do with mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, or any of those kinds of issues, not only in our community, but throughout the whole United States? We need to continue to put the pressure on our elected officials at the state and federal level.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gradisar?
Well, I think the way we handle this is, number one, we need to make sure that we deal with this problem as a medical problem and not a legal problem. So I'm in support of the LEADS program that tries to divert these people from the criminal justice system who are addicted and have small quantities of drugs. I think that's important. And in terms of funding, I'm not sure whether the state or federal government's got any more money than the city of Pueblo does to handle these kind of problems. Well, who's got the money and who caused the problems are the drug companies. They're the ones that set out, I believe, on a known course to distribute these drugs and make immense amount of money on them. And now you'll see that there's litigation going on around the country to try to recover some of those monies from those drug companies, and that's what we should use to fund these medical programs so that people who've become addicted because of the false statements that were made by these pharmaceutical companies to help them get the care they need. I think that's where the money's going to have to come from in the final analysis, and I think Pueblo ought to be a participant in that, and we should, make sure that we're at the table when those kind of funds are divided up and those kind of actions are brought to, because we've got those kind of problems. I see things, this sort of runs in a cycle, and I've seen Pueblo, and I remember Pueblo when people came back from Vietnam addicted to heroin. And we had methadone clinics for them to treat them at that time, and that was a big thing there. So these things sort of go in cycles, and as Steve said, this is not a problem that's unique to Pueblo, which doesn't mean we don't have to deal with it, because we do. But I think we're going to have to get the money from these drug companies if we're going to make really any headway on it.
Places like Denver and other big cities across the country have been talking about safe injection sites, and you just referenced methadone clinics. Is that something that you would be supportive of as mayor?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not willing to say I'd be supportive of it or not supportive of it at this point. I'd want to get more education and be more educated about it. I think it's important, though, that, as I said at the outset, this be treated as the medical problem it is, not as a legal problem. And I know there are other countries around the world, when people are addicted to drugs, they give them those drugs so that they don't have to go and rob somebody to get money to buy drugs and those kind of things. Now, nobody thinks addiction's a good idea or that that's how people ought to live their lives. But if there are people there, we ought to try to figure out a way that, okay, this is what they've chosen to do. How can we keep them from harming, the rest of society? And so I think we need to be open to all those avenues and explore all those alternatives as we face this problem.
Thank you.
To a topic that was touched on briefly here as well, we'll begin with you, Mr. Gradisar. Homelessness. As you know, this winter the city recently set up a temporary warming shelter, but in finding a solution, there's a larger issue about the homelessness population. Sam Chambers asks, as the mayor of Pueblo, would you assume the responsibility for the lack of homeless facilities in Pueblo, and what are your specific plans to assist this community?
Well, as the mayor, I wouldn't assume the responsibility for the lack of facilities. I think it's fine what the city did in terms of renting that temporary shelter so that people have shelter from freezing temperatures and nobody's freezing on the streets here. I think the city has a limited role there. This issue, this homelessness problem, is a complicated problem because of the causes of homelessness. I mean, it's an opiate problem because some of the people that are homeless are addicted to opiates. It's a livable wage problem because some of the people that are working in the community don't make enough money to have affordable housing. So it's an affordable housing problem as well. I think all those kind of issues and all those kind of areas have to be addressed if we're going to make a dent in it. And frankly, there's some people, and that's the lifestyle that they choose. They want to live that way. But for those people that are situationally homeless, we have agencies. I, during this campaign, have been attending a few meetings of the Continuum of Care Committee, social service agencies, religious organizations that provide services and have access to services for the homeless. And it's amazing the kind of services that are out there. And I've been at those meetings when people have begged to send veterans, homeless veterans, to us because we have money for housing for homeless veterans. So I think part of what, and the city wasn't really represented at these Continuum of Care Committee meetings. And as your mayor, I'll make sure the city's represented there, because I think it's important that the city know what's going on and the city sort of coordinate that and make sure the word's getting out to the community about what's going on in terms of dealing with this problem. So I think there's a lot of services out there that are being provided, maybe not in as coordinated as fashion as possible, and maybe it's not as publicized as it needs to be, but I think the city needs to play a leadership role there, but I don't think we should be primarily the ones responsible for providing shelter and housing them.
Thank you, and Mr. Nawrocki.
Yeah, thank you. I think until two different agencies decided, especially one agency decided to get out of the homeless business, this never was really a topic that we would talk much about, because on 13th Street, Salvation Army took care of the homeless. We had the soup kitchen, and we had the Wayside Mission. So this was never a topic for local government. It's just recently, in the last couple of years when I was president of City Council, that Salvation Army determined that they were going to change their mission in Pueblo, Colorado, not in Denver, Colorado, but in Pueblo, Colorado, and they decided that they were going to work with families. That certainly is their right as a nonprofit organization to do that. It is only recently that this has become an issue, plus the neighborhood where the 13th Street shelter was located rose up against that shelter. That shelter is perfect for serving the homeless, except nobody wanted it in their community. It had been there for years, and I think they were tired of it. The zoning changed, and we were not able to get that back in place. I do think we do have a responsibility to make sure in the wintertime, it does get cold, believe it or not, in Pueblo, Colorado, even when you're not playing golf, but I think we have a responsibility to take care of anybody that's in our city that doesn't have a place to stay. But I don't think it's our responsibility to own a building. I would support a nonprofit or religious organizations that are willing to go out and do that. We could help, we could give them the money, they could pay us back, we'd be a loan, we do that kind of things. We do provide services to nonprofits, and we do provide funding for nonprofits through the city. But I do think that the homeless, this is a state and a national issue. We have the Mental Health Institute is sitting with vacant buildings out there. Why cannot we get the resources to take care of the substance abuse, the chronic substance abuse, the chronic homelessness? Fort Lyons, we've been able to do that for the veterans. But I just heard recently, I was talking to somebody down the road in the Lower Arkansas Valley. I like that sign there, thank you. And they said if they don't make it in Fort Lyons, they just let them out in the community there. I said, I'm shocked, I can't believe that. I mean, when the state hospital deinstitutionalized the mentally ill state in Pueblo, Colorado, and we need state and federal support with that issue.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Pueblo as a cultural city. We've already touched on that a little bit tonight. In Colorado Springs and Denver, the mayor is often seen as promoter-in-chief for tourism. We talked a lot about tourism tonight. Business recruitment and leadership. What is Pueblo's brand? Each of you, how do you perceive Pueblo's brand so far, and what would you like it to be? And how would you be promoter-in-chief for Pueblo? Mr. Nawrocki, let's start with you.
Well, I think I already touched on it a little bit by rebranding our regional area as being gateway to the Southwest. I was on City Council when we voted on the 4 monument pieces of art that are on the 4th Street Bridge that Ken Williams did. That's just a sample of what's yet to be coming for the Dillon Bridge. 2 monument pieces of art that are going to be 55 feet tall, will be towering over the freeway. And in the name of those 2 pieces of art, which is going to cost us $800,000, $200,000 for maintenance, and we already are 2/3 there in terms of getting the money. None of that is coming out of the city or county of Pueblo. That it is going to be an incredible entrance into our city. Again, going back to the treaty, Guadalupe, Hidalgo, in terms of all the justification for us to be called Gateway to the Southwest, we want to make sure that when people come to our city, that they understand that this is different. They're in Colorado, but they're not in ski country, they're not in mountain climbing country. They are in southern Colorado, which the heritage, and it's so diverse, that's what's so great about the steel mill, European history, and the Mexican history have come together and melted together in our community. We need to continue that. I said I was committed to raising $1 million a year to promote Pueblo. Tourism certainly would be a big part. I've also am recommending 4 different advisory committees that would be permanent advisory committees to the mayor's office. One of them has to do with destination and tourism. And I think we need to draw people from the community to help promote it along with the mayor's office. But art is something that we have been well known for many, many years. We just need to be able to promote it. We sit on I-25. It's the corridor going into the southwest. It all starts here. We need to get more people off the freeway to show them what we have, and that will help diversify our community.
For years and years, tourism money has been connected to the lodging tax in Pueblo, and I know that the chamber is always asking for more money.
Sure.
Ever since the recession, when that calculation changed a little bit. Do you think, I mean, you talk about your $1 million, but how much is it going to take? I mean, is $1 million enough? How long for $1 million? I mean,
well,
can you
again,
give us a time frame?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. You know, I said I used that. That was a standard set by Grand Junction. I got those numbers from the chamber. You're right. The lodging tax that has collected is over $1 million is collected. It goes into the general fund. You know, again, coming out of the Great Recession, all the money went into the general fund, helped spread across the city to balance the budget. Is there a need for more of that money to go back into supporting tourism? Absolutely. But at the same time, we are still trying to recover from the Great Recession. And I do feel that with the increased publicity, promotion of our community, we're going to have more tourist dollars coming to our community. And the sales tax, remember, the city lives and dies on sales tax, whether it be lodging tax or direct sales tax. And the only way we're going to be able to grow our budget at this point in time is if we increase the revenues coming in, and that's increasing sales and getting more people off the freeway, getting more people to stop in Pueblo, Colorado. We're going to help improve that economy, and tourism and the art district, the art corridor, are 2 of the big things that we can do.
Thank you. Mr. Gradisar, can you tell us how you would be promoter-in-chief?
Yeah, and let me just start with the tourism tax. As a member of the board of directors of the Pueblo Chamber of Commerce in the early 2000s, this was always a struggle because we have a head tax, and it's not paid by any of us in this room unless you're staying at a hotel. But it raises $1,500,000 a year. And of that, we use $500,000 or $600,000 to promote tourism. That's the purpose of the tax, to promote tourism. The rest of it has been absorbed by the city council into the city budget, and it's not used to absorb tourism. So it's always a constant struggle. So I would take that tax and use it for what it's designed for, to promote tourism, and use that money for that purpose, because that's how we get more money in here, as we bring more people in. We need to market our amenities. I mean, we have fantastic amenities in this community. We've got a river trail system that's unequaled in this state. We've got a single-track bike system at Pueblo Reservoir that is unequaled in this state and compares with anything you can find in the mountains. And if we market that, we're going to get some young people here who want those outdoor activities. They can use those facilities year-round. Obviously, we have Lake Pueblo, who's now one of the most widely used state parks in the state of Colorado. But we have these other amenities that we need to market them, get people here to use them. And if we do, they'll come, they'll spend their money. But I think we need to use that tourism tax for what it was intended for, to attract tourists. It's not any tax that we pay. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard because you have to take it out of the budget, but that's what the voters approved it for, was to attract tourism. And that will just bring more money into the pot if we're able to do that.
Mr. Gradisar, do you think we need to do something locally, like a cultural or scientific district, the way that Denver does, in order to create some general revenue locally, tax revenue, for what you're talking about?
Well, it might be that we have to work ourselves into that. I'm not convinced that we have to do that now. So I wouldn't be prepared to say I would support something like that. We certainly need to use some of that tourism money to promote the creative corridor, because those people are bringing people in. The Art Center is bringing people in from from surrounding areas. So that tourism money can be used for those kind of purposes. Whether we need a specific tax for arts and creative issues, I don't know at this point.
Okay. Mr. Nawrocki, same question. I mean, do you think that the city of Pueblo and you as mayor would want to support a cultural or scientific district as a tax vehicle for promoting, like you said, $1 million a year.
Well, yeah, and again, I think there's a responsibility from the private sector. I think that kind of partnership is good, but I think, if I remember right, Nick, you were part of a ballot initiative a number of years ago that was providing sort of money for the Art Center, for the zoo, and that's kind of similar to what they do in Denver. I think that happened, and it was defeated, and I think one of the reasons it was defeated, not that it was a bad idea, it was because of all the other nonprofits were excluded from it. It was only like about 4 or 5 different organizations that were going to receive the benefit of that money. So I think it would be very difficult to do that, especially in a community that has so many needs. When you got 30% of your population living in poverty, especially the kids, 20%, 25% adults, there are so many needs in terms of providing human services. And I think that would be a luxury that we probably would not be able to afford. But I think the patrons in this community are incredible in terms of what they do to support those organizations, the Art Center, the zoo, and I think that we need to do more of that. We need to support that. We do support the Art Center. We do support the zoo. We do support the Riverwalk. All those things are attractions, and we use government money to help them.
And I'm just going to jump in and ask one more follow-up of Mr. Gradisar. We heard a lot about, the Gateway to Southwest, Mr. Nawrocki's plan. Can you tell us a little bit about where you see Pueblo's brand going if you were elected?
Well, I mean, Pueblo's always been the Steel City and the home of heroes, and I think that's worked for us pretty well. I'm not one who thinks that labels or branding is necessarily the end-all and be-all. I think what you need to do is market your amenities and let people know what Pueblo's about. So as the mayor, I'll be out there talking about what Pueblo's about. And I don't think it matters much what you call it, but it's important that we let people know what's here and how we can accommodate them if they want to come here for a convention. Or, obviously we're about to finish the expansion of the convention center. Hopefully that'll result in some additional economic activity here. But that's what I think the mayor's responsibility is to talk Pueblo up wherever the mayor goes and talk about those great things and those fantastic amenities that we have here and try to encourage people to get here. And to the extent that we need to use some of that $1.5 million that we're collecting for tourism to do that, I say we do that.
Thank you.
We want to switch gears now and talk about each of your visions for the city of Pueblo. And since you're both going to have to hit the ground running, so to speak, here we are in a runoff election already into what would have been the first year of your term. Can you tell the people of Pueblo, Mr. Gradisar, how will you set up your administration?
Well, I mean, there's not obviously much of a transition time. So we spent some time thinking about the transition, trying to meet with some department heads in the city of Pueblo, find out from them what the challenges are from their perspective from inside. I think we need to set up a transition team made up of outside people and City of Pueblo people to work on those issues. There's a lot of vacancies that have existed. I think there's been an attitude in the city that let's don't deal with this, we'll just save it for the mayor. So there's a lot of vacancies in department heads and organizations that are out there. They just sort of kick the can down the road, hoping somebody else will have to deal with it. So, I mean, a lot of it, we won't really know how big the problem is or what we're going to deal with till we actually get in there and see it on the ground. But make no mistake about it, this is going to be a lot of work to put this new form of government in place, and people are going to have to work hard at it, yes.
Do you have some people in mind, though, for key positions?
Not really. I've met the department heads. I'm not going to be presumptive and say that, so-and-so is going to be such and such or anything like that. I think it's just way too presumptive to do that at this point.
Well, Mr. Nawrocki, same question. How would you structure your administration?
Well, I think this again goes back to why I feel like I'm the most qualified candidate. I have spent 8 years on city council, 5 times in a leadership position. I know all the department heads. I know how the city operates. I know that I could walk in that door. I would be leaving an organization that has over 100 staff and has about 8 different departments. It's kind of a micronism of the city. I know how to run a large organization, and I could walk in 2 weeks after the election and organize that group because I know them and I know what they do. And I also have the support of City Council, which I think is paramount. Just remember that any of the department head changes will have to have the approval of City Council. That's part of the amended charter. And I think that's going to be, again, it's going to be incredibly important to have a good relationship with City Council. They will be part of that transition. They need to be a part of that, because otherwise you're going to isolate them. So I think it's really, it's going to behoove the city to be able to have somebody walk in as mayor that in day one is going to be able to hit the ground running, has the relationship with the elected officials already within the city, has a relationship with all the department heads.
Okay, and anybody that you have in mind for, any specific...
You know what, I have talked to a number of different people, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to become the mayor. You can't expect somebody to say that they're going to publicly say that they're going to be the deputy mayor or chief of staff when they're in a full-time job. More than likely, you're going to pick somebody that already has a job. So I think it's not that easy. I think it's probably not going to happen until whoever wins this will be able then to be able to pick those kinds of individuals.
We'll move on to city services. The 2019 city budget is expected to have a deficit of about $6 million. So how do you intend to balance the budget, grow revenue, and still make sure the city delivers critical services? We will start with you, Mr. Nawrocki.
Well, first of all, you did say 2019 budget, right? It's a balanced budget, but we're using on-fund balance money to balance the budget. So it is a balanced budget. Don't anyone think it's not balanced. But we're not touching the 10% reserves that are designated through resolution that City Council made a number of years ago. Those reserves were able to grow to 11, 12%. Some of that money is going in to balance it. That, again, shows you the importance of a structural deficit that the city of Pueblo has. We need to have more revenue in order to balance that budget. We will have to go back, if this continues into 2020, we'll have to go back looking at staff. Where else do you save money in a budget at a city when 2/3 of the personnel costs are what eat up the budget? And so I would hate to think that we're going to have to go backwards. That's why we need to really be able to, whoever the mayor is, to hit the ground running and be able to already understand the budget process. I was president of City Council 5 different times during that time when we did balance the budget through attrition. Did services suffer? Absolutely. Who provides the services to you? People. And so unfortunately, we've had to balance the budget on the back. We need to continue figuring out a way to increase the revenues, and we're going to do that by diversifying our economy, continue to try to draw more people to our community. If this city does not grow, and trust me, one of the things I love about this city, it has big city amenities, but has a small town environment. That's what I love about Pueblo. I don't want that to change a lot, but if we don't grow, we're going to die. And so we need to figure out a way to increase that revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Gradisar.
Yeah, I think we need to increase the economic activity, as I said in my opening remarks, in Pueblo if we're going to be successful. One of the ways you handle the budget is the budget is a number, and you balance the budget by not filling vacancies, and that's what the city's done for a number of years. They've funded positions in the budget, but they've never filled those positions, so they're not paying the money out. So it's sort of a shell game in that fashion is how they've done a lot of that. So we have to increase the revenues. I think we need to look at additional sources of revenues. Maybe we need to look at, and the United States Supreme Court just basically recently said that, states and local governments might be able to get a tax on internet sales. Now those of you who shop online might not like that because that might make the price of things go up a little bit. But if we could do that and figure out a way to do that, tax internet sales, that would result in additional revenue to the city of Pueblo that we could use to provide these services and fund these programs that are there. In many respects, I think the city's got to get more lean and more mean. I mean, we have to be more flexible. In the private sector, we do that. In the public sector, sometimes it's, well, why should we do this today? Let's wait until tomorrow kind of attitude. And I think we need to really emphasize to the people that are providing services that we need to work hard, and the citizens of this community expect that, and I'm committed to making sure that the city staff has that mentality and that we'll have that customer service model as we move forward in the community.
I want to ask a follow-up question for both of you there, because you both talk about growing revenue, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about sales tax, and in order to grow revenue, we need people to buy more things in the city of Pueblo. And on that note, Pueblo has a higher rate of poverty than a lot of other cities in the state. And I think those things go hand in hand, that if people have more money to spend, they will spend it. So how do you plan to get people to spend more money when they don't have it to spend?
Well, get them more money. Get them more money. Get better paying jobs. You know, bring more industries in here so that people are being paid better. I mean, that's what I think you do, is you have higher wages for people that are working, so that they're able to put more money in their pocket. And you know, it's obviously not just a Pueblo problem. Pueblo is a big problem, but it's a nationwide problem where you have this income inequality. Things are out of balance. They're not in balance. You've got one group of people with a lot more money than anybody else. And the problem with giving tax breaks to this group of people up here is that they have everything they want. If you give money and tax breaks to these people here, whoops.
Good thing it wasn't steel.
Okay. So if you target your economic activities, you put it in the hands of people that'll spend it. They're going to spend that money here. When it's like when the mill when it was booming and people were out there buying boats and trailers and motorcycles and those kind of things. When they got money, they spent it in this community. That's what we need to do: attract industries and businesses that will pay higher wages and.
So I guess the point is that everything is really dependent on economic stability in Pueblo.
And
right?
Economic activity,
right.
Increasing that economic activity, yes.
Did you want to add anything, Mr.
Well, absolutely. You know, this goes back again to Pueblo being a destination. We need to diversify our economy, get people off that freeway. Millions of people go up and down our freeway every year. How many do we get? Tourism is a $13 billion industry in the state of Colorado. Why doesn't Pueblo, Colorado get their share? I'll tell you what happened. When Walmart built a store out in Pueblo West, the city of Pueblo lost $1 million a year of revenue in sales tax. We've had a lot of leakage. People shop in Colorado Springs. Now they're shopping out in Pueblo West. This city needs to grow. We need to grow towards Colorado Springs. We need to have more houses being built. We need to support our builders. We need to support developers. We need to try to attract people here. It is so expensive now. You know how expensive it is to live in Denver. That's why people are actually coming to Pueblo. That's why right now the housing market, it's hard to find a house to buy. I mean, that's shocking. When was the last time that happened in Pueblo, Colorado? Inventories are down. We need more buildings. We need to support the business community. Pueblo needs to be open for business. We need to open our doors. We need to make it easier to do business, and that'll help bring about more revenue. But we need to diversify our community, and I still think gateway to the Southwest, that's the way we're going to be able to have our own character and be able to advertise it, promote it, and want people to come to Pueblo, Colorado.
Mr. Nawrocki, glad to see that you weren't injured there by
No, thank you. I'm glad it wasn't steel.
We're going to move on now. We're running low on time, so we're going to move on to some direct questions. This is for individual candidates here, but we're going to begin with Mr. Nawrocki. You and I had a conversation a few years ago about CSAC, the Citizens or the Community Service Advisory Commission, and essentially this is a function of city and county government where taxpayer money supports local nonprofits in the community. However, you as the director of a nonprofit, your nonprofit was receiving the largest share of that money, even while you were on the city council. Now, you told me at the time you weren't a part of the vote on that, but I want you to see if there's something you'd like to tell the people of Pueblo about that arrangement who might have some questions about your independence as mayor.
Well, I think as mayor, I would support funding nonprofits through CSAC 100%. And by the way, if you remember, Andy, that since I was on city council, our budget from the city had been cut by over $100,000. So I don't think I had a lot of influence in terms of that money coming to our agency. I'll just make that real clear again. That, and I kind of resent that because I abstained from every vote there was on those nonprofits. But I do think we have a responsibility to continue funding the city and the county, and I would support that 100%.
Mr. Gradisar, the president of the city council publicly raised concerns about a possible conflict of interest when you were a public trustee. While there have been no formal allegations of wrongdoing, how will you reassure Puebloans that you will avoid conflicts of interest if you were elected mayor?
Well, I won't lease any space in my building to the city of Pueblo if they have to pay twice as much to get half as much space somewhere else. That's what I'll say about that. That situation, I was a public trustee in Pueblo County for 17 years, appointed by 4 different governors to serve as the public trustee. One of the things you need to know is that no taxpayer money is used to operate the public trustee's office. All the money that's used to operate the public trustee's office is generated by foreclosures and releases of deeds of trust. So over that 17 years, and foreclosures and releases are cyclical. They go up and down. There were periods of time that I never got a salary when I was supposed to get a salary as the public trustee. What happened was the Denver Post did a series of stories about the 10 appointed public trustees. They didn't like the system. They wanted to change the system. Governor Hickenlooper asked all 10 appointed public trustees to resign. I was one of them. I did. All of us were eligible to be reappointed as the public trustee. I decided that Governor Hickenlooper was looking for somebody to do that on a full-time basis. The reason that office was in the building where I was at is because I didn't have room in my office, which is where it usually was. And we charged the same amount of rent for better space that they were paying downtown. So it was that kind of a deal that Governor Hickenlooper decided he wanted to have full-time people in that office, and I decided not to reapply as the public trustee. So that's it in a nutshell. He asked all 10 appointed public trustees to resign. I did. I didn't reapply for reappointment. So.
We'll move on to one last question, and we will begin with Steve Nawrocki. Our closing question for both candidates comes from Carla Hendrickson. At the end of your first term in 2023, what would be your specific benchmarks for evaluating success as mayor?
Well, first of all, there's a need for a strategic plan, and I had alluded earlier that there would be 4 different advisory boards. That's above and beyond the advisory board that we're going to be using for, and we are using for, the off-ramp to determine whether we municipalize our utility. Those advisory boards will be responsible for developing a brand new strategic plan. The strategic plan obviously will have benchmarks, and that goal would be done in the first year of being a mayor of our city. I think that we do have a strategic plan. It hasn't been updated for years, but I think we need to start over with a new one. The other thing is just take a look at how you do measure when the city does grow and how the economy improves. You look at sales tax collection. You look at the number of jobs that are created in the community. An example also will be the Superfund impact of the Bessemer area. $50 to $70 million EPA money is going to be going into that neighborhood. We need to make sure that we leverage that to do as much as we can to improve the conditions in the Bessemer area. I think that the barriers on the east side and the west side, those are things that we can measure. We need the isolation that we find on the west side because it's cut off by the railroad tracks. There's talk of a road coming from Pueblo Boulevard to downtown right through the west side. Can you imagine what that would be able to do in terms of create commercial activity and bring more jobs to the west side of Pueblo? The east side, we need to continue to work on the corridor that connects downtown to the eastern part of the county. That is in its works. Councilman Atencio has been working on that for years. That is something that needs to continue. I do think there are obvious benchmarks. A strategic plan would outline and be much more specific in terms of being able to measure. But I do think sales tax, number of jobs, the success with the EPA in terms of the $50–70 million coming into our community. And also I think housing starts, and population growth. Those are other ways that we can measure the success, what I would do as mayor in the first 5 years.
Thank you. Mr. Gradisar.
Well, at the end of my term, the change in government to a strong mayor system will be fully implemented. There will be a buzz in the community that things are changing, that we're finally moving in the right direction. There will be increased economic activity measured by an increase in jobs, increase in sales tax, and housing starts. The street repair utility enterprise will finally be functional, and we'll finally see the results in the form of new and repaired streets at the end of my first term. I'd also like to see during that period of time a robust summer employment program for the young people in our community and a robust internship program for college students working for the city of Pueblo. That's one of the ways we can attract some high caliber, high talent people to work for the city government is by those internships. And what I say to people is that if you're happy with the way things are going in Pueblo, you've got the immediate past president of the city council who served 8 years on the city council as a candidate in this election. I offer a different choice. I've never been on the city council. As I indicated to you, I've been on the Board of Waterworks. On the Board of Waterworks, we have had a strategic plan. You have to have in the water industry a strategic plan if you're going to be successful. And as a result of the work that the Board of Waterworks has done, the city of Pueblo has the best municipal water supply of any city in the state of Colorado. And we're able to do that at the lowest possible price. So as I indicated earlier, I've been in the private sector, and I've lived through, and my clients have lived through the ups and downs of the Pueblo economy. I haven't been in the public sector for most of my career. My vision for this community, as I indicated, is that we'll have an economy here where every young person who wants to stay in Pueblo is able to earn a living and find a good job to support them and their families. That's my goal, and that's my vision. Nobody should have to leave Pueblo in order to find a job or to earn a living. But to realize that vision, we've got to increase the economic activity in the city of Pueblo, and we need to aggressively recruit new jobs. This is obviously a historic election. I certainly appreciate your being here tonight, your attention. I've been doing these forums since April. I think was the first one we did at Rawlings Library, and I'm glad to see the community engaged because this is important for our future, because for the first time in our lifetimes we're electing that full-time leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nawrocki and Mr. Gradisar, and thank you to Pueblo Community College for hosting this. I want to thank John Rodriguez, who did a lot of the behind-the-scenes work. Thanks to our panelists. If you'd like to see the candidates' answers compared on a couple of issues side by side, go to vote411.org starting tomorrow. From all of us here tonight, we would like to encourage you to vote. Turn in those ballots before January 22nd. The future of Pueblo depends on the involvement of its people, so go vote and be that difference.